Chapter 2. The Games. The first marked deck arrived hidden inside a shipment of lamp oil on August 29th, wrapped in oilcloth and tucked into a hollow wooden barrel that Marcus nearly dropped when he felt the unexpected weight shift. He carried it to the stables with hands that wanted to shake but didn't dare, waited until the white overseer moved on to inspect the next wagon, then slipped the package inside his shirt. That evening, in the tack room that smelled of leather and horse sweat, Isaiah unwrapped the cards with fingers that had grown steadier over the weeks of planning. The deck was beautiful, identical to Blackwood's expensive cards, down to the gold edging and intricate scrollwork on the backs. But these cards bore different marks, subtle variations that only someone who knew to look for them would ever notice. A tiny crimson dot in the lower left corner marked the aces. The kings had a barely visible break in the pattern's inner circle. Queens showed a microscopic extension of the decorative flourish on the right edge. And along the bottom of each high card, so faint it could have been a printing imperfection, ran a thin line the color of dried blood. "They're perfect," Ruth breathed, appearing silently in the doorway. She'd developed a talent for moving through the plantation like smoke, present one moment and gone the next, gathering information and passing messages with an efficiency that bordered on supernatural. "Moses came through," Isaiah agreed, studying the cards with admiration. "His contact in Charleston must be very good. These could pass for Blackwood's originals, even under close inspection." "Moses says there's 2 more decks coming. One arrives next week with the tobacco shipment, the other the week after with the cotton buyer from Savannah." Ruth moved closer, lowering her voice, though they were alone. "But there's a problem." Of course there was. There was always a problem. Isaiah had learned over the past 3 weeks that every step forward revealed 2 new obstacles. Every solution created fresh complications. Planning a conspiracy while enslaved was like trying to build a house in a hurricane. The wind kept tearing down what you just constructed. What kind of problem? 3 of the outside stakes arrived early. Blackwood's holding them in the barn already, under guard. Says he doesn't trust their owners not to try last-minute substitutions. Ruth's expression was grim. "Simon, Jacob, and a woman named Rebecca. They're scared, Isaiah, really scared, and they're asking questions." Isaiah's mind raced through implications. 3 people in the barn, 2 weeks early, with guards watching them constantly. 3 people who knew nothing about the plan, who might say the wrong thing to the wrong person if approached carelessly. "I need to talk to them," he said. "Too dangerous. The guards are rotating every 4 hours. Henderson, Miller, and that new one, Blake. Henderson's half-deaf and lazy, but Miller's sharp. Blake's young and eager to prove himself. You can't just walk in there without a reason." "Then I'll create a reason." Isaiah was already moving, his mind clicking through possibilities. "Blackwood ordered me to inventory all the stakes before the lottery begins. Property assessment, he called it. Documentation for insurance purposes in case any of the stakes try to escape or harm themselves." It was a lie, but a plausible one. Blackwood was obsessed with documentation, with recording every detail of his property and possessions. An inventory would fit his character perfectly. Ruth studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I can forge a work order. Blackwood's handwriting isn't difficult. I've been practicing with his old correspondence." She paused. "But Isaiah, If even one of those three decides to tell the guards about anything suspicious, I know, he met her eyes, but we can't leave them in the dark. They need to know what's coming, need to understand they have a choice between dying as stakes in a rigged game or fighting back with us. Even if the odds are terrible, people deserve to choose. And if they choose wrong, if they choose to betray us thinking it'll buy them mercy, Isaiah's expression hardened. Then we deal with it, quickly, quietly, before it spreads. Ruth held his gaze for a long moment, and he knew she was seeing the change in him, the way the past 3 weeks had burned away whatever softness remained. He was no longer the careful house servant who flinched at the thought of violence. He was becoming something else, something harder, colder, more dangerous. Something necessary. "I'll have the work order ready by tomorrow morning," Ruth said finally. "Henderson's on duty then. He won't look too closely." The converted tobacco barn sat at the edge of the plantation's working grounds, a sturdy structure with thick wooden walls and a new iron lock that gleamed in the morning sunlight. Isaiah approached it at 9 a.m., carrying a leather-bound ledger and a confident expression, the forged work order folded in his breast pocket. Henderson was dozing against the barn wall, his rifle propped beside him, his hat pulled low over his eyes. He was 53, had worked as an overseer for 30 years, and had long ago settled into the comfortable laziness of a man who believed his position was secure. At the sound of footsteps, he jerked awake, hand moving reflexively toward his rifle. "Easy, Mr. Henderson," Isaiah said, his voice carefully deferential. "Master Blackwood sent me to conduct the inventory. He wants documentation on all the stakes before the lottery begins." Henderson squinted at him suspiciously. "Ain't heard nothing about no inventory." Isaiah produced the work order, holding it out with just the right amount of patient servility. "Here's the authorization, sir. Master Blackwood signed it himself yesterday evening." Henderson took the paper, held it at arm's length, squinted at Ruth's perfect forgery of Blackwood's sloping handwriting. For a terrible moment, Isaiah thought he might actually read it carefully, might notice some small detail that gave away the deception. Then Henderson handed it back with a grunt. "Fine, but make it quick, and don't go starting no trouble in there." "No, sir, Mr. Henderson. Just documentation." The overseer unlocked the barn door, the new lock clicking open with well-oiled precision. "You got 15 minutes. I'll be right out here." Isaiah stepped into the barn's dim interior, his eyes adjusting to the change in light. The space had been divided into sections with wooden partitions, creating individual cells about 8 feet square each. 3 of the cells were occupied. In the first cell sat a man Isaiah recognized from the list, Simon, age 37, a carpenter from the Preston tobacco plantation in Virginia. He was valued at $1,600 for his skills in furniture making and building construction. He looked up as Isaiah entered, his eyes wary and exhausted. The second cell held Jacob, barely 19, purchased recently by Senator Cunningham from a Mississippi plantation for $1,100. His youth and health making him valuable field labor despite his lack of specialized skills. He sat in the corner, knees drawn up to his chest, looking like he hadn't slept in days. The third cell contained Rebecca, a woman of about 30 from Beaumont's rice plantation in Georgia. The list had valued her at $1,400. She was a house servant and skilled cook. She stood when Isaiah appeared, her posture rigid with controlled fear. Isaiah opened the ledger, made a show of examining the cells, then spoke in a voice just loud enough to carry, but not so loud it would draw Henderson's attention. "I'm Isaiah from Ashwood Plantation. Master Blackwood sent me to document the stakes before the lottery." He met each of their eyes in turn. "But that's not the real reason I'm here." Simon stood slowly, moving to the wooden bars that fronted his cell. "What are you talking about?" "Keep your voice down," Isaiah said sharply. "The guard outside is half deaf, but he's not completely deaf. And what I'm about to tell you could get all of us killed if anyone overhears." That got their attention. All three moved closer to their cell doors, straining to hear. Isaiah spoke quickly and quietly, laying out the situation with brutal efficiency. The gentleman's lottery, Blackwood's marked cards, the plan to switch them, the goal of creating chaos and using it to strike back. "You're insane," Simon breathed when Isaiah finished. "They'll kill us all. They'll torture us first as examples, then hang us publicly. You're talking about attacking the wealthiest men in the South." "I'm talking about refusing to die quietly," Isaiah corrected. "You've been selected as stakes, which means your current owners are willing to risk losing you in a card game. You understand what that means? You're expendable to them, disposable. Whether you cooperate or not, whether you're good slaves or bad slaves, they've already decided you're worth more as gambling chips than as long-term property." Jacob's face had gone pale. "But if we do what they say, maybe whoever wins us will be better than who we got now. Maybe nothing," Rebecca cut him off, her voice sharp. "I've been a stake twice before at smaller games. First time I was won by a planter who worked me 16 hours a day in his kitchen and beat me when the soufflés didn't rise properly. Second time, I was won by a man who decided to sell me at profit. That's how I ended up with Beaumont. This isn't going to end well for any of us, boy. The only question is whether we die on our knees or on our feet." Isaiah felt a surge of gratitude for her clear-eyed assessment. "There are risks," he admitted, "enormous risks. Some of us will probably die, maybe all of us. But we'll take some of them with us. We'll burn their records, destroy their documentation, create chaos that ripples beyond this plantation. And maybe, just maybe, some of us will make it out." "You got weapons?" Simon asked, his tone shifting from skeptical to calculating. "Crude ones, blades, spikes, clubs, hidden in several locations around the plantation. If we can get loose from this barn during the chaos—" "How do we get loose?" Rebecca interrupted. "These locks are solid. The guards are armed. Even if the planters start fighting each other, we're still trapped in here." Isaiah pulled a small piece of metal from his pocket, one of Clara's hairpins, filed down and bent at specific angles. "We have someone who can pick locks. And we have someone on the inside during the games who'll create the initial disruption. When the chaos starts, the guards will be distracted, possibly called to the main house. That's our window." "How long a window?" Simon pressed. "Maybe 10 minutes, maybe less. But it's more than we've got now, which is no chance at all. The barn fell silent, except for the sound of Henderson coughing outside and the distant noise of field workers singing as they labored. It was a coded spiritual, one that carried hidden meanings about trials and tribulations and eventual freedom. Isaiah had heard it hundreds of times, but never really listened. Now the words seemed to carry weight, seemed to be speaking directly to this moment. "I'm in," Rebecca said finally. "I got nothing left to lose. My children were sold off years ago. My husband died in a rice field accident that Beaumont called unfortunate property damage. If I'm going to die anyway, I'd rather die making these bastards bleed." Jacob was shaking his head, tears streaming down his face. "I can't. I'm sorry, I can't. I'm too scared. I'll do what they tell me. Maybe I'll survive. Maybe you'll die slowly instead of quickly," Rebecca said, not unkindly. "But that's your choice, boy. Nobody's forcing you." Simon had been quiet, his carpenter's hands gripping the wooden bars of his cell, his face working through calculations. "The chaos you're planning to create. You're talking about turning the planters against each other, right? Making them think someone's cheating?" "Exactly," Isaiah confirmed. "Rich men with massive egos, armed, probably drunk. If we can engineer a situation where they start accusing each other of rigging the games, their own greed and paranoia will do half our work." A slow smile spread across Simon's face. "I built furniture for Preston for 12 years. Fancy desks, card tables, display cabinets. You know what I learned? Rich men hide things. Money, jewelry, documents they don't want their wives to know about. And they build secret compartments into their furniture to hide those things." He paused. "Preston's got a card table with a hidden drawer in the base, activated by pressing a specific knot in the wood grain. I built it myself. He keeps money in there, emergency funds for when he loses big at cards." Isaiah's mind was already racing ahead. "If we could get access to that table during the lottery—" "You could plant evidence," Simon finished. "Extra marked cards with a different marking system. Or marked cards that match someone else's system, making it look like multiple people are cheating. Turn it from a two-person problem into a conspiracy that implicates everyone." "You'd help us do that?" Isaiah asked carefully. "That's not just refusing to cooperate. That's active sabotage." "If you get caught, I told you. I built Preston's furniture for 12 years. 12 years of watching him use things I made to hide wealth I'd never have, to project power I'd never feel. I'm tired of building cages for my own people." Simon's expression hardened. "Tell me what you need and when you need it." Isaiah felt something shift, the plan evolving in real time as new information created new possibilities. "I need to know exactly how to activate that hidden compartment. And I need to know what Preston's card table looks like so I can identify it during the games. It's distinctive, mahogany with inlaid mother-of-pearl around the edges. The hidden compartment activates when you press the third knot from the left on the decorative trim. It'll click and pop open about half an inch. Easy to miss if you're not looking for it." "Time's up," Henderson's voice called from outside. "Whatever documenting you're doing in there, finish it up." Isaiah raised his voice slightly. "Just completing the final entries, Mr. Henderson. One moment." He turned back to the 3 people in the cells, speaking rapidly. "I'll be back in 2 weeks with the others. On September 14th, all 20 stakes will be brought here. That's when we finalize the plan. Simon, you're with us. Rebecca, you're with us. Jacob," he looked at the terrified young man, "I won't force you. But if you betray us, if you tell the guards anything about this conversation, I promise you'll die before we do." It wasn't a bluff. Isaiah had already decided that betrayal would be dealt with immediately and permanently, regardless of the cost. Jacob just nodded miserably, his face buried in his hands. Isaiah closed the ledger with a decisive snap and called out, "All finished, Mr. Henderson." The barn door creaked open, sunlight streaming in. Isaiah walked out with the calm, unhurried pace of a servant who had simply completed an assigned task, his face showing nothing of the racing thoughts behind his eyes. The plan was getting more complex, more dangerous, more likely to end in spectacular failure and mass execution. But also, for the first time, it felt like it might actually work. September 5th brought the second deck of marked cards, delivered by a tobacco buyer from Savannah who had no idea that the gift for Mr. Blackwood he'd been asked to carry contained anything more significant than expensive playing cards. Ruth intercepted the package with practiced ease, her position as head of the house staff giving her access to all incoming deliveries. That same day, Clara successfully picked the lock on Blackwood's desk drawer. She accomplished it in 43 seconds, using 2 modified hairpins and the technique she'd been practicing obsessively for 3 weeks. She did it in broad daylight while Blackwood was meeting with Senator Cunningham in the parlor, with Isaiah standing watch at the study door, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Clara's hands were steady as surgeon's tools as she worked the lock, her fingers finding the mechanism's weak points with the precision of someone who'd spent hours mapping every click and resistance. When the lock finally gave with a soft snick, she looked up at Isaiah with fierce triumph in her eyes. Inside the drawer, wrapped in velvet cloth, were Blackwood's 3 decks of marked cards. Clara's hands moved with practiced efficiency. She pulled out the decks, unwrapped them, examined them briefly to confirm they matched the intelligence from Patterson, the card dealer. Then she replaced them with 3 of the substitute decks, each one marked in the crimson system that only the conspirators knew. The switch took less than 2 minutes. Clara rewrapped the substitutes in the original velvet cloth, replaced them in the drawer exactly as they'd been positioned, and locked it again with the hairpins. When Blackwood returned to his study 15 minutes later, he found Isaiah dusting the bookshelves and Clara emptying the fireplace ash, both of them performing their duties with the blank-faced efficiency of well-trained servants. He walked directly to his desk, sat down heavily, and pulled out the drawer to retrieve some correspondence. His hand brushed the velvet-wrapped package. He didn't even glance at it. Clara caught Isaiah's eye for just a fraction of a second, and he saw in her expression the same wild exhilaration he felt, the intoxicating rush of having successfully deceived the master, of having placed a weapon in the heart of enemy territory, of having turned Blackwood's own cheating system against him. That evening, the conspirators met in the chapel to examine Blackwood's original marked cards. Samuel held them up to the lamplight, studying the tiny dots and pattern variations with the detailed attention he usually reserved for examining flaws in metal. "He's good," the blacksmith admitted. "These marks are subtle. In a dimly lit room with everyone drinking and focused on the game, nobody would notice unless they knew exactly what to look for." "Which is exactly what makes them vulnerable," Isaiah said. "He's counting on subtlety and misdirection. But now he's playing with our cards, marked with our system. When the games start, we'll know what everyone is holding. We can manipulate the outcomes, engineer specific losses and wins to create maximum chaos." "How?" Marcus asked. "We won't be in the gaming room. We'll be locked in the barn under guard." "Clara will be there," Ruth said. "She's been selected to serve during the games, bringing drinks, emptying ashtrays, providing atmosphere. Blackwood wants pretty young house servants to impress his guests. He doesn't realize he's putting our eyes and ears right in the middle of everything." Clara nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I can signal card values. We work out a system, how I hold the tray, which side of the table I approach from, small gestures that look natural but carry information." "Information that does us what good exactly?" old Thomas challenged. "Even if we know who's winning and losing, we're still locked up. We still need to get loose, get weapons, create the chaos you keep talking about." Isaiah had been wrestling with this problem for days. The plan had multiple moving parts, each one dependent on the others working perfectly. It was like trying to build a watch while wearing mittens. Theoretically possible, but practically almost impossible. "The chaos comes in stages," he said, thinking it through out loud. "Stage 1. Clara signals card values to us somehow. We need a relay, someone who can see Clara's signals from the barn and pass information to us inside." "The barn has small windows high up on the walls," Samuel said. "Barred, but you can see out of them if you stand on something. If we had someone positioned at the window facing the main house—" "They could see Clara in the gaming room windows," Marcus finished. "The gaming room is on the second floor, right? Clear line of sight from the barn's upper windows. So, we relay information about who's holding what cards," Isaiah continued. "We track the flow of the games, identify key moments when tension is highest. Then Clara does something. Spills a drink, drops a tray, creates a distraction that allows her to plant something incriminating." "Like what?" Leah asked. "Like extra marked cards?" Simon's voice came from the shadows near the door. Isaiah turned in surprise. He hadn't heard the carpenter enter. But there he was, having somehow escaped the barn and made his way to the chapel unseen. "How did you get out?" Ruth demanded. Simon held up a bent piece of metal that looked remarkably similar to Clara's lockpicks. "I'm a carpenter. I know how things fit together, how mechanisms work. I've been practicing on the cell lock. Every time the guards change shifts. Henderson barely pays attention. Miller's more careful, but he's got a pattern. He checks the locks at the beginning of his shift, then not again until the end. That gives me a 4-hour window." "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed. "You could have escaped. Why didn't you run?" "Run where?" Simon asked flatly. "I'm a strange black man in South Carolina with no papers. I'd get maybe 10 miles before someone captured me or killed me, and then they'd torture me to find out where I came from, and all this," he gestured around the chapel, "would be discovered, and everyone would die. No, if I'm going to risk death, it's going to be for something more than just delaying the inevitable by a few days." Isaiah felt a surge of respect for the man. Simon had every opportunity to save himself, and had chosen solidarity instead. That kind of courage was rare and precious. "You said something about planting extra marked cards," Isaiah prompted. "Right. Preston's card table with the hidden compartment. I know for a fact he keeps emergency money in there, at least $500 in gold coins, probably more. But what if we put something else in there too? Something that belongs to someone else. Something that makes it look like Preston is colluding with another player to cheat the games." "Like whose marked cards?" Ruth asked. "Like Blackwood's original marked cards," Isaiah said, understanding flooding through him like cold water. "The ones we took from his desk. We plant them in Preston's table, make it look like Preston stole them to gain an advantage." "Or we plant them on someone else," Simon suggested. "Frame someone for having multiple decks, for running a conspiracy to cheat. Once the accusations start, once wealthy men start searching each other for evidence, the whole thing unravels into paranoia and violence." The plan was evolving again, growing more complex and more dangerous. Isaiah could see it taking shape, like a structure being built in his mind. Foundation, walls, roof, each piece supporting the others, each piece vulnerable if any single element failed. "We need perfect timing," he said slowly. "The card switch has to happen at exactly the right moment. Too early, and they'll notice something's wrong before enough money is at stake. Too late, and the games will be over before we can create chaos." "Second night," Clara said with certainty. "First night is small bets, feeling each other out. Third night is final distribution. By then, it's too late to change outcomes. But second night is when the real money flows, when desperation sets in, when the stakes get high enough that people start taking risks." "Second night," Isaiah agreed. "September 16th. That's when we make our move." The final deck of marked cards arrived on September 11th, and with it came troubling news from Moses at Riverside Plantation. Senator Cunningham had hired additional security for the lottery. 4 men from Charleston, experienced guards with reputations for brutality and efficiency. "They're not plantation overseers," Moses reported during a brief meeting behind the stables, where he'd come to deliver horses for Cunningham's visit. "They're professional slave catchers, men who hunt runaways for bounties. They're smart, mean, and they don't miss things the way regular overseers do." Isaiah felt ice forming in his stomach. Professional slave catchers changed the equation significantly. These weren't lazy guards like Henderson, who could be fooled by forged papers and confident lies. These were men who'd built careers on being suspicious, on catching people trying to deceive them. "How many total guards during the lottery?" he asked. 9 regulars from various plantations, plus these 4 professionals. 13 armed men watching 20 stakes. Moses shook his head. Your plan's already dangerous, Isaiah. With this many gods, it's suicide. It was always suicide, Isaiah replied calmly. We're slaves, planning to attack the wealthiest men in the South during a gathering where they're armed and protected. The odds were never good. A few more gods doesn't change the fundamental calculation. Doesn't it? 13 guns against whatever crude weapons Samuel's been making? Even if everything goes perfectly, even if you create chaos and get loose from the barn, you're still outnumbered and outgunned. Unless we turn some of those guns against each other, Isaiah said quietly. Unless we engineer a situation where the gods don't know who to shoot, where wealthy planters are accusing each other, where paranoia makes everyone see enemies everywhere. Moses studied him for a long moment. You've changed, he said finally. When this started, you were looking for a way to disrupt the lottery, maybe help a few people escape. Now you're planning a war. No, Isaiah corrected. Now I'm accepting that we've been at war our entire lives. We just weren't fighting back. This is what fighting back looks like. The days blurred together after that, a frantic rush of final preparations and mounting tension. Samuel completed his weapons cache, 14 crude blades, 8 iron spikes, 6 heavy clubs fashioned from oak branches with iron bands. He hid them in 7 different locations around the plantation, each cache marked with subtle signs that only the conspirators would recognize. Clara practiced her signaling system, developing a complex code based on tray positions, hand gestures, and timing. Hold the tray on the left hip, high cards in play. Approach from the right side of the table, someone's bluffing. Pause to adjust her headscarf, major bet incoming. Ruth compiled detailed intelligence on each planter who would be attending. Their gambling habits, their relationships with each other, their personal grudges, and business rivalries. Beaumont and Caldwell had a dispute over rice futures that cost both men thousands. Preston and Reed had competing interests in the Charleston slave market. Cunningham owed Blackwood money from a failed land speculation. Every piece of information was a potential trigger, a way to turn allies into enemies when the moment came. On September 13th, the day before the stakes was scheduled to arrive, Isaiah held one final meeting in the chapel. All the conspirators were there: Ruth, Clara, Samuel, Marcus, Leah, old Thomas, and Moses, who'd managed to slip away from Riverside on the pretense of delivering equipment. Tomorrow it starts, Isaiah said without preamble. 20 stakes will be brought to the barn. 13 guards will be watching us. 15 of the wealthiest planters in the South will gather to gamble with our lives. And we're going to turn their entertainment into their nightmare. He laid out the final plan step by step, confirming everyone's roles and responsibilities. Clara would serve during the games, signaling card values and planting evidence. Samuel would be positioned at the barn's upper window, relaying information to the others. Simon would activate the hidden compartment in Preston's card table during a predetermined distraction. Marcus would be ready to reach the weapons cache in the stables. Leah would coordinate with the other house servants to create chaos in the main house when the signal came. Old Thomas would lead the escape from the barn once the locks were picked, and Isaiah would be the conductor, coordinating everything, adjusting in real time as circumstances changed, making the terrible decisions that would determine who lived and who died. There's no going back after tomorrow, he he said, meeting each person's eyes. Once we're in that barn, once the lottery starts, we're committed. Anyone who wants out, now is your last chance. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then we're done talking, Isaiah said. Get some rest. Tomorrow we find out if property can become people again. The meeting dispersed, each person slipping away into the darkness. Isaiah remained in the chapel for a long time, staring at the rough wooden cross on the wall, wondering if there was a God, and if so, what that God thought about enslaved people planning murder and rebellion. He decided it didn't matter. If there was a God, and that God had allowed slavery to exist, then God's opinion was irrelevant. This was human business, to be settled by human hands in human blood. Isaiah left the chapel and walked back toward the main house through darkness so complete it felt like moving through ink. Somewhere in the distance, a hound howled mournfully. Closer by, cicadas sang their endless chorus, oblivious to human schemes and human suffering. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the gentleman's lottery would begin. And tomorrow, the stakes would bite back with teeth sharpened by centuries of oppression and rage. Isaiah smiled in the darkness, an expression with nothing of warmth in it. Let the games begin.